The announcement came Sunday, 15 years to the day after Drew Brees signed his first contract with the Saints. After the Dolphins said no thank you, we'll take Dante Culpepper and a wrecked knee and give up a second-round pick instead. Sorry, Dolphins fans, but it's true. Drew Brees announces his retirement from the National Football League, Chris. And when you look at the schedule, the timeline, the calendar,
right.
Yesterday was really the last day he could let the Saints know, because the Saints have to get down to the business of filling out a quarterback depth chart. And if they're going to keep Jameis Winston, they got to get on it, because as of noon Eastern today, he can officially negotiate a contract with another team. So it worked out perfectly. Maybe in hindsight, we should have known all along that's when Drew was going to do it. That's what he did. Had a lengthy Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, one of those three posts with the explanation as to why he was doing it. As expected, he retires after all those years in the NFL, was drafted by the Chargers in the second round 20 years ago, and now walking away from football as one of the best quarterbacks of all time.
I mean, absolute legend. That's all you can really say. When you talk about Drew Brees, you just talk about, like, that consistency of perfection. I mean, unbelievable career. A guy who, always kind of outperformed what you expected him. Like, you always talk about guys who, get the most out of their God-given abilities. Like, to me, that's where Drew Brees, he's like the poster child, is one of those guys. Work ethic, work in the classroom, perfection in the way he throws the football so he can be the most accurate guy ever, the quick decisions and everything he studied all those ways. I mean, you're right, first ballot Hall of Famer, great guy, and really, again, just really one of the all-time legends of our sports. And I also think more than that, the poster child for smaller quarterbacks. I mean, that's another thing that when I think of Drew Brees, he's one of the barrier breakers of that discussion. Oh, if you're not 6'3" or 6'4" and built with big square shoulders and can't stand in there and throw rifles down the field, you can't be good in the NFL. Drew Brees is one of the first people in our league that kind of say, no, there's other ways to do this. Let me show you how, and that's where he's really special.
Think back to 2001. The Chargers held the first overall pick in the draft. They did the unexpected trade with the Falcons, allowing Atlanta to jump up and take Michael Vick.
Right.
The Chargers dropped down to 5, I believe it was, where they picked up LaDainian Tomlinson from TCU, Hall of Famer. Round 2, Drew Brees, Hall of Famer, although not with the Chargers, because 3 years later, the Chargers decided to go for the taller, more prototypical Phillip Rivers, and it wasn't long after that Brees left as an unrestricted free agent. And, of course, the rest is history. He wasn't bad by any means when he was with the Chargers, but no one expected him to become what he became. If so, the Dolphins would have rolled the dice on a guy who had 20-plus studs in his shoulder that was injured in his final game in San Diego, and they wouldn't have sent a second-round pick to Minnesota for Dante Culpepper, and who knows, maybe Nick Saban would have stayed in Miami a few years longer than he did if he'd had Drew Brees. But part of it, too, is Saban and Brees maybe wouldn't have been the same magic as Peyton and Brees, and it worked. And it worked as well as any quarterback-coach combination ever has for all those years, Chris. And you mentioned the work ethic. That's why I think it was plausible he was going to come back, because of the work ethic, because of the brain, because – you don't have the arm strength. Well, how much arm strength did he ever have? He still could run the offense if he wanted to. That's why when it started to look like he was thinking about coming back, we took it seriously, because if he wanted to keep playing, he could keep playing.
Well, yeah, he's one of those guys, first off, that you just go, well, I'm not going to doubt him. I'm not going to doubt that aspect of him. He's, continually proved us all wrong. Whether it's back to those days coming out of the draft, doing what he did after he left the Chargers and going to the Saints and all those type of things. And yes, it's not like the play was like, oh my gosh, it's so bad, he's got to retire. But at the same point, I will say it's not the Drew Brees we saw 3, 4, 5 years ago, the last 2 years. And it was getting towards that, tipping point. But either way, I mean, what Drew Brees, Sean Payton have done in the NFL, I mean, we've never seen just a quarterback, offensive coordinator, head coach combination with just that much offensive explosiveness, the consistency week after week, the able to be surgical no matter what defense you put in front of them. That to me is where that marriage is really special. And then Sean Payton just being able to be that mad scientist like you're talking about, more plays, more this, more ideas, shifts, formations, all of that. Drew Brees could always handle it and then also save the offense when Sean Payton's offense wasn't there to be had and saved that way too. So really an amazing career. It really is. And you're right, Mike. I mean, yeah, he could have probably came back and played. But I'm glad because I honestly, I think it was time, and I think he's had an unreal career, and now we can celebrate it.
You were teetering toward explosivity there at one point.
I
Let
was.
me tell you, that would have been okay. That
I
would
know.
have been okay. It would not have been a
roll off
Simmsism.
my tongue the way, and I was like, wait, maybe that wasn't right. So I kind of went to the explosiveness. Yes.
Today we have an excuse, though. This time change to deviate as we reset and say, good morning, it's PFT Live. It's darker out than it had been. And I had stress dreams all night long that I overslept, and it was all mashed up into this weird narrative where I did wake up late, and I was doing the show in what I sleep in because I had to run up here. Actually, the camera was in my bedroom. You know, all the weird stuff you have when your brain mashes together.
Sure.
But it was all from the time change. We were spoiled by the fact that it was actually daylight when the show began, and now we have to wait a month or two until it's daylight again. First world problems, I know. But, man, I hate that every year.
Oh, it hurt. It hurt waking up today,
forward.
right? I mean, I don't know what it was today. It didn't hit me yesterday as much as it did today, where it just was like, whoa, it's time to get up. Excuse me. I mean, I couldn't believe it. I was in shock. I was in the deepest sleep ever. So, yeah, I'm awake now, but you're right. A little foggier here getting going this morning, maybe compared to other mornings.
Well, and today's a day that'll snap us out of it quickly. Beyond the Drew Brees situation, we'll talk about that more.
Yeah.
Free agency begins as a practical matter in just about 5 hours because that's when players can officially begin fielding offers from teams and striking deals. The teams just can't announce them. They're not done until Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern, but for all practical purposes, they are done. As to Brees, though, look, first ballot Hall of Famer, that's a no-brainer. Where he fits in the pantheon of all-time greats, it's going to be subject to dispute.
Yeah.
I probably put him higher than you would.
Right.
There are a lot of great quarterbacks that have played over the years. His records, his moments, the things he's done just by way of compiling statistics like few ever have.
Yeah.
And really, but for Tom Brady, he'd be walking away with all the records right now. Brees has been incredible. He broke that Dan Marino record that doesn't even show up on the screen of the top 6 single-season performances. 50-84 was the record from 1984 until 2011. Think about it, with the proliferation of the passing game. And then it was Brees, and you see Peyton Manning and Tom Brady on there as well. 5,000 used to be largely unprecedented. It's become somewhat routine, and Brees is the guy who shows up with more 5,000-yard seasons than anyone else. And he really did compile statistics and achievements like no one else. He has the Super Bowl win. I know it tormented him to not get a second one, and that was another thing that may have caused him to think about giving it one more run after seeing what Tom Brady did this year. But one is good enough. Fran Tarkenton, Dan Marino, Dan Fouts will tell you one is good enough, Drew. You didn't need a second one, and he's getting into Canton with the accomplishments even without the Super Bowl championship. But at least they got that. And it came at a perfect time, 3 years after the rebirth of New Orleans, 3 years after his arrival in New Orleans, and then they spent the next decade or so trying to duplicate it. And we're still contenders most of the time. There were some seasons where they were hovering just under 500, and the offense was still great. It was the defense was abysmal. There's never been a question with the offense in New Orleans, not since Brees arrived.
No, they've really been relevant ever since Brees and Sean Payton have been there. You're right. I mean, yeah, there was a little, of course, the bounty gate in those years that threw them off kilter a little bit, and they weren't maybe the same quality football team. But as soon as that ship got righted there, it was okay, wow, and they made some second run here. You know, like you said, disappointing they never got to a Super Bowl or won another one. Yeah, sure, certainly. They were one of the better teams in football, but regardless, you go through the 2000s there, you know, from 2006 to 2010, you know, it was the Saints, watch out. Ooh, if they get in the playoffs, they can make a run. And then, yes, we went through that time period. But, man, what a run really the last 5-6 years to go along with it. And the numbers they're mind-boggling. They're mind-boggling. All the yards, the touchdowns. And, of course, he will forever be known for Mr. Completion Percentage too. And that's the biggest thing. Just the efficiency in which he moved the ball, kept his offense in great situations, did all of those things. That's what I'm always going to remember Drew Brees. And despite, that narrative that you said, he never had a big arm and all that. When you go back and watch Drew Brees highlights, though, I mean, the physical ability is real. That's one thing. We're talking phenomenal athlete. We're talking he could have played professional tennis and really probably made waves there, right? I mean, and then you talk about his athleticism within the pocket, but even the arm, yeah, okay, maybe it's not one of the great arms of all time, but I know when I go back and watch old highlights of him, I still go, damn, his arm is better than we gave it credit for, or we give it credit for right now at this point of his career. In his prime, he can make every throw you needed for sure, and he was a great athlete. And, between that, the yards, the completion percentage, he's the guy that everybody looked at to be like, for the quarterback world, let me watch Drew Brees to get my technique in order. That's really what he was. And even for coaches, it was like, let's show Drew Brees film to our young quarterback. Look how he keeps his base. Look where he keeps his shoulders. Look how he keeps the placement of the football. Look how he goes through the reads, and with each read, his feet marry his brain and his eyes and where they go. And he really became like the teaching tool for that aspect of playing the quarterback position. And that, to me, is part of his legacy as well, Mike.
It really is amazing when you think about those 5,000-yard seasons, which have become not quite commonplace. You're throwing an extra game most likely starting this year, and they will be more common. When Brees entered the NFL, the only 5,000-yard season was Dan Marino, 50-84 from 1984, a record that held through the constant growth of the passing game.
Right.
Since then, since Brees' arrival, he's got it 5 times. Now, other quarterbacks have done it. Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Ben Roethlisberger, Jameis Winston, Patrick Mahomes, Matthew Stafford. No one else has done it more than once. Marino only did it once. Brees did it 5 times, and it was 2011. That was the year that he obliterated the record with 54-76, and then Peyton Manning by 1 yard topped him 2 years later in Denver. But just amazing, and maybe just a matter of time until somebody gets to 6,000 yards, again, with that 17th game.
Right. That's
going to give somebody a shot to do it. But Brees showing that production in the passing game at an obscene level was a possibility. He made it into a reality. And you think about where that Saints team was. And, revisionist history comes into play because once we get a narrative that we can wrap our arms around, we forget how things were. 2004, 2005, pre-Katrina, right. Tom Benson was looking for an excuse to move that team to San Antonio.
Right.
And in the immediate aftermath of Katrina, the NFL made it clear to Benson that team's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
And the NFL and the Saints became an integral part of the rebirth of New Orleans.
Definitely.
And it all culminated on that Monday night game, the U2 and Green Day concert ahead of time, and then the Steve Gleason block punt. New Orleans was back. And,
right.
It went from a team that was just kind of hanging around. They'd have a kind of accidental playoff appearance from time to time.
Right.
Yeah. And then ever since then, in 2006, they went to the NFC Championship game. I mean, I can't think of a team that had more of an abrupt, holy crap, from, not bottom of the pack, but bottom third
to
definitely. Top third, and it never, and that was it.
No, you're right.
They've been the same ever since.
Been a staple in the NFL ever since. I think you're right, Mike. That's really part of his legacy too. The fact that he is the king of New Orleans, really in that aspect. I think we always used to think of like Archie Manning, right? I think he was the guy I thought of really, as far as a professional sports player when associated with New Orleans. And that's not, of course, the aspect anymore. Like Zion Williamson, first pick of the draft 2 years ago. Well, hey, you're here to what? Take over for King Brees to be the new guy here in town. He is like a staple of the NFL with what him and Sean Payton did with the Saints. But, of course, yeah, he's truly the crown jewel of athletes in that city. And, I also find cool, like, we talk about a Super Bowl, right? Super Bowl's like unreal story. It was a game, really. Oh, they're not going to beat the Colts and Peyton Manning, and even within that, beats Brett Favre, son, a guy that's native to that area, and then of course beats one of the kings or the princes of New Orleans and Peyton Manning in the Super Bowl and has that victory. But amazing career, and you're right, Mike. That's another thing. It was a team that occasionally popped off in the playoff conversation once every 6, 7, 8, 9 years, something like that. And they become one of the consistent powerhouses of football ever since Drew Brees got there. That's pretty damn special.
And that playoff run started by sending Kurt Warner into retirement, too.
Right.
So 3 great quarterbacks that
Right.
Brees had to take down to climb the mountain. And, that Super Bowl 44, very memorable, had the surprise onside kick, something that we'll likely never see again in a big spot because they're so hard to recover now. But so many different things that culminated in that Super Bowl championship. And it felt like a team that was – every team that wins a Super Bowl feels like it's going to be back again. But they really did feel like they had everything that they needed. But the next year they didn't win the division. They had to go on the road to Seattle to face a team that had 4 fewer wins, and that was where it all ended. They didn't even get past the wild card round the second year, and then came the bounty scandal, and that was the dark years when the defense was abysmal. They were recovering from that, but then they came back strong. 2017, 18, 19, 20, they had 49 wins in 4 seasons. First team to have that many wins and not get back to a Super Bowl. And it's a shame that the final chapters of Drew Brees' career consisted of so many of these rip the heart out and look at it moments. And whether it was the Minneapolis Miracle, whether it was the defensive pass interference debacle against the Rams, the exit in overtime at home against the Vikings with the touchdown from Kyle Rudolph that had more than a little bit of a shovey there. And because it felt like they were destined to get back
20-10.
again.
They're driving. Yeah. I mean, it's 20-10. They're driving. You're going. The Bucks they're in trouble. It's over if they go down. You had that feel. You kind of felt like the Saints were in like, Brees in the offense got it going. There's Jared Cook over the middle, and you're thinking, whoa. And then he forgets. I don't know. Antoine Winfield's covering him, and then there's that fumble, and the game wasn't the same. So you're right, Mike. I mean, at the end of his career, that's what we're going to remember, that aspect. But we can't forget the aspect of, he dealt a lot of teams heartbreaking losses throughout his career too. But it's crazy. Like you've said, the Saints were one of the 2 or 3 best teams in football the last few years, and it's just been one heartbreak after another. That does stink for Drew Brees as far as his legacy in those conversations.
I'd love to know over the ensuing weeks since that game, because when you think back on that moment, it was Cook catches the ball, he crosses the 50, they're up 10, they're going to be up 13, they're going to be up 17. Antoine Winfield rips the ball out, and Devin White scoops it up, and everything changed in that moment.
Changed, right.
I'd love to know the answer to the question of how much, and not that I take any pleasure in the torment that Drew Brees had to be feeling, but how much was he legitimately thinking about giving it another go because of the way it ended versus just the natural closure. There's no rush for me to announce this. Let me just take my time.
Right.
Let me just ease my way out of this. And hey, how about the 15th anniversary of the day I signed? Let's just do it then. Let me push this off as long as I can versus I really want to come back. I really think that one more run may be the one, and I don't want to spend the rest of my life thinking, man, I could have come back for one more year, and we could have finally punched through and got Super Bowl #2, and I'll never know now if that one more year would have been the one.
Well, that's where I was going to ask you, right? Because that's one of the things is, you see this news yesterday, you start to talk about it, or think about what you're going to talk about and those type of things. Do you think over the last few weeks he was kind of sitting back, still pondering, playing, maybe waiting to hear if there was clamoring from the fans in New Orleans and maybe the organization would publicly say something about bringing them back? Do you think he was kind of waiting for some sort of sign or signals just to leave the door open? Because, like we've talked about, the things we've heard Sean Payton say. Yes, the Saints kind of said all the right things, but I don't think either one of us got the feeling that it was like, oh, we want you back, we want you back, we want you back. Do you think he was kind of waiting for that and still toying around with that idea, here the last few weeks?
I think if he was waiting for anything, and this is, as you would say, reading between the tea leaves of everything we've seen and heard and witnessed over the course of the past year, the one thing you would wait for is a phone call from Sean Payton.
Yeah.
Saying, I went back and I looked at the film. I think you still got it. Let's do it. Because the messages from Payton have been as clear as they can be. Without him flat out saying it, he's been ready to move on. He was the one who let the cat out of the bag last year that it's going to be Drew's last year, and then he had to correct himself when Drew said, ho, 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 I haven't said anything about it being my last year. And then in the immediate aftermath of the loss to the Buccaneers, Sean Payton's asked by reporters whether or not Brees is done. The report that day from Jake Laser that it was going to be Drew's last game, that if they'd lost, obviously. And Payton says that's an announcement for a different press conference. Well, you don't have a press conference to say you're coming back. So, and it'll be interesting to see if they have a press conference at all. There wasn't one yesterday. Maybe there'll be one this week. The Saints are otherwise going to be occupied trying to get some things done. Maybe they'll have a press conference at some point. It's hard to do the traditional old school press conference in the pandemic.
Yeah, right now.
But you have to wonder. We did our Oprah interviews last week. The people we'd like to see sit down with Oprah. Sean Payton and Drew Brees, get them in a room together, have a couple drinks, get the tongue loosened up a little bit, and find out exactly what went down the course of the last year. Wouldn't surprise me if Brees felt like Sean was ready to move on. And that's his prerogative. He's the coach of the team.
Sure.
But I think from our perspective, we thought he was ready to move on. From Drew's perspective, that may have been a big part of it. He may have thought that Sean was ready to move on.
Yeah, it would be hard to believe that he wouldn't receive, those signals, right? I mean, Drew Brees is smart enough that if we're kind of seeing those signals, I would think he would too, to a degree. But yeah, he wasn't going to be forced into a corner totally, I guess, throughout this process and just be like told what to do. He kind of made things wait, made us all wait, made the Saints sweat it out a little bit to a degree. And the other thing I'll say, too, even to that, because, we had fun with that last week with the Oprah draft, and we'd want to see that. But, I mean, hey, what quarterback coach combination really ends that well right in the, right aftermath, right? I mean, gosh, we can look at them all. Bill Walsh, Joe Montana.
Chris, whoa. Yeah, I got the best one for you.
Tom Brady and Bill Belichick.
No, better than that. Better than that. Hits closer to home. Who's Peyton's mentor? Who's his mentor? It's Bill Parcells.
Yeah, right.
Was it a positive separation? Did it go the way your dad wanted it to go?
That's right.
When it ended?
No.
Between Parcells and Phil Simms?
No, Parcells was gone, but it was, ended up being Dan Reeves. But either way.
Never mind.
But
don't
let the facts get into your great story.
Narrative. Don't. It was a great one. Forget about truth. Forget about reality. None of that matters. Haven't we learned anything over the last 5 years, folks? It doesn't matter what actually happened.
But what
matters is it a good story?
It's a real thing. You're right. It's just, again, it's quarterbacks, coaches, okay. It never ends quite perfectly. It's not storybook. There's very few in the history of the NFL. And yeah, okay, they're probably a little bit whatever, but they'll mend it together, and then they're going to realize what a special run they had. There's a great competitors, and you're telling one competitor or give them signals like, hey, you can't, we don't know if we want you all the time, and he's like, what? Well, what are you, crazy? I could still play, and of course they butt heads that way. So I don't think it's going to be anything of a problem going into the future, but a lot of these end this way.
How could I forget that great passing of the baton from Bill Parcells to Ray Handley?
I know. How could you have forgot that?
Shame on me. Just like Richie Pettibone, blink and you missed the entire tenure of the bridge after the great Hall of Fame coach.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.